Welcome to the Arena Decklist Podcast. I'm Jerry Thompson, joined by Brian Gottlieb, and we are in the midst of the Zendikar Rising Championship. I had to look up at my notepad to make sure that I read that correctly.
You nailed it. I have it actually open on the monitor in front of me because we have had some difficulties with the names of these tournaments recently. I will own that. That's on us. But good preparation on both of our parts this time to absolutely know what tournament we're talking about.
Yeah, and to be fair, this one's not that hard, right?
That's true.
This is basically a pro tour. It is only 184 people, so a little bit on the smaller end, at least compared to previous pro tours. But this is dual, standard, and historic. Depending on when this podcast goes up, I mean, the tournament's going to be happening all weekend, so you should be able to catch some of it. And we wanted to wait to record this podcast until we had the deck lists, because that seems like an important part to actually making relevant content rather than having a cast that goes up on Friday and we don't know what a lot of the players are playing.
Yeah, it's an awkward timing. I'll own up to that, because ideally we would have loved to do this as a preview show to kind of be like your viewership guide for this event. But deck lists just don't get released in that timing window. And I don't know why. Like, let us advertise your event for you for free. We're happy to do it. We want to talk about it anyway. You know, I think these events could use a little hype right now. We're transitioning to this new system and this new way of doing quote unquote pro tours. So that's just a little free advice going forward. Give us a chance as content creators to hype up your event. And the best way to do so is with these deck lists for sure. Yeah,
I think the rationale behind it is, you know, fairness for the players. And
yeah, I don't buy it.
I'm on board with that, but at the same time, I don't think that this is necessarily the best way to go about it.
So the argument is that like some players will have more time to like prepare if you give the deck list on Thursday as opposed to Friday morning, or
right.
I mean, how is it not fair if everyone has it?
Well, because some people might have other commitments, right?
I agree with you, but isn't that just kind of the nature of what we do? Like, is it fair that some of the people participating in this tournament have full-time jobs and some only play Magic as a profession? Like, there's always going to be divides, and there's no such thing as true fairness, right? There's never going to be a merit test when it comes to a Magic tournament. So I am more for making those type of concessions to improve the product rather than like arbitrary lines of fairness, because you just can't make it fair. It's never going to actually happen.
So I agree with you there. If you decide to throw all that out the window and then, you know, maybe allow players to kind of like hype up the event by either making content, or maybe you see, you know, the players who are playing in the events like stream their deck list leading up to it or whatever to kind of drive hype. I think that is a net good thing. But you're also, I think, punishing people who are more willing to submit kind of like off the cuff deck lists, because, you know, for example, like going through like the standard deck list, it's like, well, if there's just like a bunch of gruel, well, maybe I'm just not going to spend time testing against this. But if there's like a team who showed up with something interesting and potentially very good, you probably test against that, right? And then maybe it's more unfair to them, or at least it disincentivizes people from taking risks and registering things like that, which would be a net negative, I think.
That's fair. That's a fair argument and a good point against it. I just kind of feel like we're getting the worst of both worlds right now, because like you do have to submit your deck lists earlier. I don't know when the exact cutoff for deck list submission for this event was. I think it was last week. Like,
it's either Sunday or Monday, right? It's like normally it's like a week before the event.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly where it was for this, but so you're missing some time and like some technology evolution in the deck list. And it's not as bad as it was like last season, where decks would be 2 to 3 weeks old sometimes. So it's certainly not anything like that, but you're also not getting the freshest deck list possible. So once you're like, okay, we're going to do early submission, feels like you need to find ways to do as much as you can with that. And I agree with you. I think they're a good promotional tool, but whatever.
Yeah, that's another thing I don't get is like, why lock people in super early? I mean, even like the pro tours were just like submit the day of, right? And in this case, where it's like all digital and everything, and they're not really doing anything with it, I don't really understand why it's like, oh, submit this a week early. It should.
My read has always been to make these like infographics that we have and, get the deck lists in order. And once they went up, they are there. They're in order. They're all downloadable. I haven't actually checked if that works. It feels like it only works about 50% of the time. But still, I think there is some merit to having preparation time. It's just you can do more with that preparation time than you're presently doing.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And then certainly like once you have all that stuff set up, which shouldn't take a week to produce, then you should be able to do more things with it. But right. Anyway, we have mostly been talking about historic because standard was not really relevant for a lot of people, except for those like playing in these events or like playing in SCG events and stuff like that. It was more about, for me at least, shiny new historic toys. And it looked like standard had kind of settled into a spot where there wasn't going to be a whole lot of innovation, but that has proven to be like very, very false.
Yeah, hard false on that one. And I was right there with you. I felt the same way about standard. And, I've enjoyed our time with historic, but we have missed a lot of narrative. And I say we've missed it. I've been aware. Like I've actually been writing almost exclusively about standard, and I've been focused on new decks and the evolution of the format. And like you said, a lot of stuff going on. So if you rely only on the Arena Decklist podcast for your news about Magic, I think it's going to be a bit of a surprise when we talk about what's going on. Although the metagame breakdown surprised me because it actually looks like I would have expected to look a couple weeks ago. And I think things should have moved a little bit further along because there have been a bunch of innovations. And certainly there are players who are playing those innovative new decks. Not as many as I would have thought. And there's some decks that I think have kind of been outmoded that are still very present in this tournament.
Yeah, I think Gruul Adventures is still going to be good no matter how you slice it. Like these new decks are definitely good decks, but I don't think that there's been enough innovation to just get Gruul out of the format completely. One of the decks I think is probably the case, which is Dimir Rogues, where looking at this metagame breakdown, like there's not a lot of stuff that I would want to bring Rogues against, but it's still like a pretty prevalent portion of the tournament.
Yeah. If I'm picking out good matchups here for Rogues, it's kind of like slim pickings. But the nature of that deck is like the classic 45% deck where you eke out some wins against everyone and you feel really smart while you're doing it because you've had to put together chip damage and countered exactly the right spell because you only have so many resources and all your timings were perfect and you made the right decision every turn. And people love that style of deck. So I get why the representation is so high. I certainly enjoy playing Rogues a lot. It feels like old Magic in a lot of ways, particularly a call out to like Lorwyn era fairies for sure. But I agree with you. Not a lot of good matchups left for Rogue in the format.
Yeah, and I'm that person. I'm exactly that person that you're talking about, where it's like that sort of gameplay appeals to me. And I played a lot of Rogues when, the format was first starting out, maybe for like the first month and a half or so. And when all of these green decks started popping up, I was doing the things that you said, Brian. I was like eking out those small edges and then still coming up like very, very short, like not even like close to being competitive in the games against these green decks. So if I knew that the format was going to be like 40% green decks at the top, then there's just no way that I would have registered this deck. Like you have to try so hard to beat them, and even then you still fall short.
Yeah, so there's some churn happening, right? And I do think that you can argue there is some vulnerability from some of the new strategies that have shown up to Rogues if you build in a very specific way. Particularly, I think like counter magic can be good right now. But most of these Rogues lists, because the green matchups are so terrible, they've done things like maxed out on Lull Mages, which a fine card, very important in that matchup. But if you're trying to be like a counterspell heavy deck against things like, say, Temur Ramp, which we're going to talk about, or Mono Green Food, or Dimir Control, all these decks where I do think you can benefit from having a lot of counterspells, you're just putting yourself in an awkward position because you've given up so many slots to even make the Gruul matchup bearable. So
right. And that's part of the problem.
Too hard. Yeah, pull too hard in too many directions right now for me to really advise anyone to play Dimir Rogues.
Yeah, exactly. Tell me about mono green food, because this is a deck that showed up maybe like the second week or so after rotation, and it was like, okay, this looks like it could be a competitor, and then people just kind of like stopped playing it. Maybe like the lists were not as refined, or the metagame wasn't in as good of a place for it. But now it just seems to be like all over the place. And if I were playing in this tournament, that's probably what I would have played.
It would have been on my short list. I agree with you that it's certainly one of the top 2 or 3 decks in the format. And the story behind it is odd because it was there. It was floating around. But I do think it was more about metagame than any actual flaws in the decks, because the deck hasn't changed all that much from its current iterations to the previous iterations. I just think at that moment, it was about Yorion, and not about Yorion as it's present in the metagame now, because there is still a Yorion deck. Going to talk about that in a moment. But the Yorion decks then were all about generating cascaded advantages on the battlefield. And these were sizable advantages, the type of advantages that mono green food just couldn't play through. Like, part of the reason why I found Selesnya Yorion was that there was a lot of mono green food around. And that felt very, very easy from the Selesnya side, because you had great answers to everything they tried to do in Elspeth Conquers Death, and you just outscaled them so dramatically that their only way of participating in the game was through an aggressive draw, and they don't have that many aggressive draws. They can do it, and that's one of the draws to the deck, is that they have this multiple facets to their game plan. But I think in general, they're more comfortable playing a longer game against something that floats more to the middle. They're a big mid-range deck. There are bigger mid-range decks, but I think other factors in the metagame are holding down the biggest mid-range decks and making some space for this kind of weird hybrid to really find success in this moment. And I think that's the great thing about the standard, is every time you come back to it, there's a different set of factors, and this can change in a week. I mean, there's this whole tremendous backlog of decks that have risen to these situations in the past. So could there be another window for old school Yorion decks? I mean, I even saw like an old school polymorph Jeskai Dream Trawler deck in SCG results last week. And I'm like, well, that technology is pretty outmoded, but you start to think about, well, if there's mono green food everywhere, maybe this actually does work again. So all of this stuff can cycle back around, but there's no question that given the shape of where the metagame was at, particularly like I think the shift to Gruul, mono green food was in a really good spot.
Well, your phrasing was very specific. You said it would be in your top 2 or 3 choices. Mm-hmm. What is your actual top choice?
It is close between Temur Ramp and Dimir Control. I think my probable choice would be Dimir Control based on maybe more play preference than anything else. And that is not, like, obviously I did not have to prepare for this event. So that is with smaller sample sizes than I would have given if I was participating in this event. But it does seem to be tunable, have answers for everything I want to contend against. And based on the metagame that did show up, I think Dimir Control is going to have a pretty successful weekend.
So when you say ramp, like Temur Ramp, do you mean the Adventures deck?
Yes. Yeah, okay. Maybe I should be more specific about that. They've kind of merged, but you're right that its identity is more clearly focused around the Adventures package than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have Beanstalk Giant no matter what. Some amount of cultivates. I saw some players with like 2. Some players went up to 4. You're kind of topping out a Genesis Ultimatum. Like, you are doing rampy stuff, but this is very much the Adventures deck that I remember, basically, where it's like, you're kind of doing your thing, accruing small edges, and then just killing people out of nowhere with like Beanstalk Giant into Obosh and stuff like that.
Yeah, they have so many good game plans. That's what really stands out to me about this particular version of Temur Adventures. And how many versions of Temur Adventures have we put up with now? And the whole history of Throne of Eldraine is wild. Like, we will look back on this era and what has happened, and the decks that this set has inspired as unprecedented in Magic history, without a doubt, between the Yoko era and then the Lucky Clover eras and just all of what we've put up with from Throne of Eldraine. It's so interesting to see where the deck is now. But this is a really, really good deck despite everything that's missing. And it plays so many game plans well. It has the attrition game plan on the back of Edgewall Innkeeper plus the Great Henge. So it can outdraw really any deck once its engine starts going. But also now you have the simplest of aggressive draws based on just curving into Lovestruck Beast, which is fine. That does the job in many situations. But like you mentioned, you have Obosh explosive aggro draws where it doesn't come up too often, but you're happy to have access to it. And then you just have combo kills where you just cast a Genesis Ultimatum and win on the spot because you have Terror of the Peaks in your deck. So there's all these different angles to play. And you even have some like control elements as well. Like obviously things like Brazen Bar or Bone Crusher Giant. They're just enough disruption for people who are trying to do pure beatdown things. And there is a little bit of that around. I saw some mono white aggro. There's like green white adventures, and occasionally you see some mono red, although there's almost none in this tournament. But there's a reason for that, and that's mostly Lovestruck Beast, honestly.
Yeah, the green decks are very good at producing stoppers for small creatures.
Yeah, Lovestruck Beast is the most played card in the standard portion of this tournament. You know, if you've been a red mage attacking into Lovestruck Beast, you know that pain very well.
Yeah, what are you going to do? Soul Sear that thing?
Not a reasonable solution to the problem. And the fact is there is just no reasonable solution to the problem. And it's strange to see that as like, I don't know, there's some argument like, is the most played card the best card in Standard? I think the answer is often yes. And I think it's fair if you want to make the argument that Lovestruck Beast is the best card in Standard right now, because it does define what you can do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's like the strongest card or anything, but it's just a matter of green having a lot of different engines. If Edgewell Innkeeper didn't exist, for example, yeah, obviously, you know, green does everything. If Innkeeper didn't exist, you would see much less of that card. But it also works well with the Great Henge, which is another engine, and blah, 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 you know? So there's a lot of moving pieces that make it the most played card, but I definitely wouldn't say that it's like the most powerful card in the format or anything.
Yeah, I mean, it shined in Historic, even with, or not Historic, but maybe more Pioneer than Historic. But also it saw some presence in Historic, but without Edgewell Innkeeper in those cases. So it's proven it can do it just on rate. I agree that its success in Standard very much hinges on Edgewell Innkeeper, but as far as just raw power, it's pushed back to the older format. I mean, I think it's proven itself as a rate monster. It's just that good.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. Yeah, I don't know. So I think like Teamer's a reasonable case for deck I would play. The other one I agree with you. Rounding out the top three probably is Dimir Control, and I was doing similar things throughout the format, just like trying to make Ugin work because Ugin beats up on a lot of these green decks, and this deck has Extinction Event. You know, like the like meme deck that I posted a while back was like the mono blue thing. And the Dimir decks mostly kind of like resemble that, where they have like Maze Mind Tome, Solemn, Ugin. A lot of them are playing Yorion, but also like, you know, having actual interaction helps those matchups, right? So adding Extinction Event is like pretty low opportunity cost and does help you a lot against green decks.
Yeah, and I think these decks did a really nice job of evolving in unexpected ways. Like if you asked me to build a Dimir Control deck at the start of the format, I wouldn't have built anything resembling this. I mean, I think we had mostly written off Solemn Simulacrum as boomer magic and something that just didn't really hold up well in the present era. But you're right that the home for this deck is as the best Ugin deck. And it's funny that a Teamer quote-unquote ramp deck, and you can contest that classification, that's fine, but it's funny, like a ramp deck shows up at the same time as this control deck, and it's the control deck that is actually built to be the Ugin deck in the format. But there has to be one. There has to be an Ugin deck to hold this stuff down, and if it's going to be a very battlefield-centric approach to the metagame, you need to find space for Ugin. And that's why, like, you know, you start to see, like, oh, if people are going to cast 8-mana spells, then I really want to be counterspell guy again. But it just doesn't pan out because these decks also have a earlier method of getting onto the battlefield in things like Ashiok, and just Solemn can do beatdown stuff. Like it matters. You won't win many games that way, but the card you will win games with when it comes to beatdowns is Crawling Barrens, which is a card I just absolutely love. And I think it's such a good finisher for these control decks. Yeah,
I wasn't sure how to feel about that card when it was released, but then you see it in play for the first time and you're thinking about like, oh, what can my opponent have to actually deal with this thing? And like the list is not very long.
No, the format definitely turned to sorcery speed removal in a lot of ways. And also just the safety of the card. Like you don't have to commit to spending your mana on your turn to force through damage. until it's a done deal. Like put 10 counters on the thing, wait till you can completely support it, and that's fine. And it almost feels like, what is it, Nephilia Drownyard? Is that the mill land from back in the day?
Yeah, it's pretty similar.
Yeah, so you just get to spend your mana on your opponent's turn. You hold up the threat of counter magic all the time. You never expose yourself, and then your land wins the game in a very swift swoop. And I really like that pattern for all control decks, but it especially works here with the Ugin deck, where you have another way to participate in the game. Like you can just be a turbo Ugin deck, play it on turn 6, turn 7, and that'll hold the fort against a lot of other stuff in the format.
Yeah, and then you just have Dark Depths ticking down. Certainly a better way to spend your mana than Castle Vantress.
Yeah, more Castle Vantress hate here on the podcast. Your weekly dose of Castle Vantress hate checking in right now.
Dude, it's just my brand at this point.
I agree. And I agree with you here. It's not even close. There's no question. I am happy to play Crawling Barrens over something like Castle Vantress. You actually make meaningful progress on winning the game.
What about the Yorion decks that are still around? Like, basically all of them are just Doom Foretold decks, which makes a lot of sense. There's like Trail of Crumbs and the Great Henge, and this is a nice, clean answer to the weird permanents. And the format is just kind of like lacking on those.
It is, but I also think, so here's my read on these decks, and I said this in my article that I put out this week. I think the Doom Foretold variants, be it Mardu or Esper, or however you want to build it, were an excellent choice like 2 weeks ago. And they do a really good job of punishing things like Trail of Crumbs or, Rakdos Battlefields or Gruul. I think like they're strong against Gruul. Anything that's trying to like just put a bunch of creatures on the battlefield, you're pretty happy doing Doom Foretold stuff against. But I think the metagame has moved, and I think it got to a place where now Doom Foretold isn't really a threat to these larger decks. Like I don't want to be on the Doom Foretold side against Ugin, because Ugin can undo a lot of your work. And sure, Doom Foretold's an answer to Ugin, and they won't put too many other permanents onto the battlefield. Although with these decks, that's not even necessarily true, because you do have Omen of the Sea and Solemn, thanks to your reliance on Yorion. So it's not even clear that against things like Pure Control, you actually still have a good answer in the form of Doom Foretold, not to mention they have counter magic. So I think they had a home as a way to punish Mono Green Food, as a way to punish Gruul when those were just like the top 2 decks. But now that this new factor has entered the metagame in the shape of Temur Adventures and Dimir Control, I'm not buying it anymore. I just don't like the positioning of Doom Foretold into this tournament for this weekend.
Yeah, it's weird because Mono Green Temur Adventures and Dimir Control, I would have expected to be a larger portion. They are like 17%. Yes. 11%, 10% respectively. And
I think those are the 3 best decks. They should be at the top to me.
And so Gruul is 24%, Dimir Rogues is 17%, and then it looks like the Doom Foretold decks are like 11. So, I mean, you said that would have been a good choice a couple weeks ago. Well, this metagame is kind of 2 weeks ago.
It is. And that's what's weird about it. I don't know what to make of that. Is it like, did people not buy into the SCG results? Did their testing not bear out that these were real decks? Because that was not my experience. Like all these decks checked a bunch of boxes for me and seemed very, very strong.
Submitting a week early, I mean, that might have something to do with it, where these new decks are coming out and you're kind of like locked in on Gruul or something, or it's also a 2-format tournament, right? So like maybe you're spending a lot of time trying to get an edge in Historic. So
yeah, and information is moving in weird ways too in this moment. I think we shouldn't lose track of that. Like there was having played like a bunch of PTs in the past, there was a pretty clear ebb and flow to the information. Like you could get a sense of what everyone was thinking all the time. It just came out through articles and through, play on Moto. You just start to see a certain trend, and then you're like, okay, I think everyone, the collective hive mind is thinking about this format in this fashion. And usually I'd show up at a PT and I'd be right. I don't feel like I can do that anymore. Like, I don't know how you feel about reading what percentage of a metagame are going to be, but I'm just routinely off at this point, and it feels very weird.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of ways to read various trends, but you're not going to get it all right. And a lot of it is because people are getting their information from, wildly different places, right? So if you like watch streams versus like only hang out in Discord with your friends versus like read SCG or whatever, or play
Just
SCG
watch YouTube.
tournaments.
Yeah, there's a lot of different channels.
And under ideal circumstances, you try and do like a little bit of everything to try and have a more complete picture of what everyone is thinking, but you can't predict necessarily where humans are going to get their information from and what they're going to decide is correct and what they're going to filter out as incorrect.
No, very good point. And I did used to feel like I was more successful at that, but it was always a guessing game. Like you never had certainty when you were making those predictions. I just think my predictions have gotten markedly worse in this era.
Well, say you're struggling with that and you don't necessarily know what people are going to be doing. I think it makes more sense to then turn around and register something like Rule.
Okay. That's a totally fair read on the situation.
You're like, I don't know exactly what the metagame's going to be. This is pretty solid against everything. Let's go.
Can you make that argument for mono green, or do you think there are some real holes with that deck?
I think mono green definitely has a little bit more equity to gain in certain metagames than Gruul does, but it's still a relatively safe choice. Like you're proactive, you're doing a lot of the same stuff as far as, presenting like a clock first and then having an engine later, but you're maybe like less versatile, I guess I would say, just because the Gruul deck has better options being in 2 colors. You actually have like ways to interact with people and maybe better sideboard cards, stuff like that. So Gruul overall is kind of like a safer choice.
I want to get your opinion on something. I'm not 100% sure where I saw this. Someone was making the argument on Twitter. I think it might have been Ari. I apologize if I'm not crediting the right person here, but someone was arguing that because of the virtually flat payouts for this PT and the focus on really spiking an event to be able to put yourself in like certain brackets within the Rivals League or to have a chance to compete in the Rivals League, you're extremely incentivized to take high risk chances in these tournaments. And you should try and be like, in the past, you put up an 11-5 finish or like whatever it is, 12-4 in a PT, and you get invited to the next one. And that was always your goal. You keep your train rolling or you accumulate points over time and you're going to have a lot of events where now you're more incentivized to spike. Does that change your philosophy at all on bringing Gruul to this tournament?
This is funny. Do you know if Paulo saw that tweet?
I don't know. I don't remember the specifics behind it.
I remember Paulo rallying against claims like this where it's like, you have to spike in something like a Grand Prix or whatever, right? You have to go 13-2 to top 8 towards the end of the GP cycle or whatever. And he was always just like, no, you just play the thing with the best win rate. Like there is like no concept of spiking, right? I mean, especially in standard, it's very difficult to get something that's like a bunch of 80-20 matchups in a row. Like regardless, you are still almost certainly better off playing a thing that's like a 55% win rate.
Right. Yeah, I've certainly seen these arguments rehashed a bunch of times. And I think mathematically that is borne out, but also it supposes a lot. Like it supposes that you can't make accurate metagame predictions. And we just said we can't in this scenario. So if that's the case, then yes, default to whatever has the best win rate. But the concept of best win rate isn't static, right? The best win rate will always be determined by what the metagame is. And if you're doing like, I remember when I was first introduced to the concept of range in poker, it started changing the way I thought about Magic metagaming, because you can reach new mathematical conclusions if you're like, the metagame is 30% to be this, 40% to be this, 30% to be this, and weigh those against each other. And there's like a mathematically correct deck you can reach in that scenario. But all of your stuff has to be so accurate. And we've talked a bunch about how all of Magic is just like small sample size, kind of making it up and playing Calvin ball with all your numbers and using that to get to a place. So I don't know. I find these discussions really fascinating because everyone has their own opinions. And I do really see both sides of it.
I think we had opposite approaches to being introduced to range. And I think this might make a good podcast topic. I wrote an article about this a while ago. It should be free on Star City at this point. And it was basically like the reason that I was so good at PTQs and SCGs was because I was very good at preparing for ranges of things and not just like, well, I want to beat, I don't know, I'm looking at historic, right? I want to beat Rakdos and Sultai and Goblins. And then you just disregard everything else. It's like, no, I would do the thing where it's like you shave and a braid for a Bedevil to like cover your bases against Azorius control having a Planeswalker against you or something, right?
Yeah.
And that led me to huge amounts of success playing in those open tournaments because I was more prepared for the random stuff. Because it is very, very rare that your trajectory over a tournament is exactly what you expected it to be.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, you're talking about like, I don't know, prepping for people's like narrowest ranges or whatever. And I'm just like, no, I'm going to try and be as good against everything as I possibly can. And I think we're both trying to seek out ways to exploit what people do and get the best win percentage overall.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Like an optimal application of range would contemplate both those scenarios and reach the correct decision with both of those being possible. Right.
Yeah, and I mean, sure, that is probably more along the lines of what I was doing, to be honest, right? Yep. Because obviously, first and foremost, I'm tackling the bigger decks in the field, and then worrying about the other stuff. But I don't know, man. I think that there are just so many instances of me winning opens where like mono red is quote unquote not a deck, right? And then I like play against it in the finals or something, and it's like there are so many people who would have lost in my spot. But I was a little bit more cognizant of the 1%.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good approach, especially when you're leveraging a skill advantage as well. I think it's always wise to just like prepare for as much as possible.
I could make the joke and say, well, I wouldn't go that far or whatever. But yeah, you're
right.
Right. So yeah, I don't know, man. For something like this, like the standard format, it looked like it was being solidified again, but if you knew that the metagame was going to be this wide, I would try and do a similar thing where it's like, first and foremost, I want to beat green decks, right? And then I would want to have some sort of plan against everything else, whether it's just like, something that my deck naturally does or is naturally good at that can prey on the weaker stuff, or maybe selecting a strat that is naturally good against green decks so that I can focus a little bit more on the micro against everything else.
Right.
And that's kind of what leads me to like Teamer Adventures or Dimir, and less on the quote unquote safe choices like Gruul and Mono Green.
Yep. Yeah, that all tracks. Be interesting to pick the brains of some of the folks who did end up on the Gruul side of things, because it's so hard for that to be a bad choice. It's just such like a proactive, powerful deck. And I get wanting to go that way. And the advantage of experience is worth a lot too. Like that deck has been around for a while. If you have been playing a bunch of Gruul, you probably know all the sideboard tricks, all of your options, your plan somewhat, and you've found ways to beat most of what's happening. So that can't be discounted either.
Right. There's inherent value there for sure.
Yep.
And if we're talking about the concept of metagaming in standard in this day and age being nebulous, and you don't know exactly what to do, and you don't want to make any hard reads because you know that you're pretty likely to get it wrong, Gruul is kind of like a safe choice in that it can't be that wrong, right? Like you're not going to have like a bunch of 20% matchups. You might have some 40% matchups, but it's not going to necessarily tank your entire tournament based on that choice. So if you don't know the answer, I think that that's a fine way to go, even if it might not be the thing that could potentially maximize your win rate.
Yeah, I will say though, like a huge part of the appeal to Dimir Control for me is that I feel like the deck is being built in a fashion now where it's got some of the same stuff going on. It's just a bunch of like proactive, powerful cards with this control engine behind it. And taking the deck in that direction has really done a lot to improve its standing in my eyes, because Dimir control has been around in this format. Like from the beginning, I remember seeing Dimir control lists. And
definitely more counterspell heavy and stuff like that. But yeah.
Yes. And I really didn't like those lists because I felt like they were built with a lot of holes. But I feel like the deck, as it's being built now, has closed up almost all of those holes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still pretty exploitable. I would assume that if you're doing something like Dimir control, you're just expecting people to not play rogues, right? Which I think would be fair.
Yeah, I also don't think that matchup is like, it depends how they build the deck at this point. And like I said, if you're spending a bunch of slots on lull mages, then that seems much worse. And now you've kind of got a chance as the Dimir player. Not what you want to play against, but like, I don't know. I think you can find good plans against them. Surprisingly good plans, actually.
Oh, fair enough. So you're a Dimir guy. That's your called shot.
I think so. Yeah, I think I'm Dimir guy for this week. And like I said, other reasonable choices, Mono Green Food and Teamer Adventures would be the other two at the top of my trio. But it feels like a good time for Dimir to come back. It's been too long since I got to cast my control friends.
Fair enough. All right, on to Historic. Biggest deck, Rakdos and Joan Sacrifice at 30%. Next is Sultai / 4-color midrange, pretty close to 30% also, 28. Goblins at 12.5%, and then Azorius Auras, Azorius Control, Colorless Ramp, Dimir Control, rounding things out. This is just the same metagame as like months ago.
Well, we're in a quasi-eternal format at this point. Certainly we've added some new cards, but we banned some of those new cards immediately, probably correctly so.
Fair.
There also is just a weird thing with Historic where it's really hard to generate inertia in the metagame and get people to pick up new stuff or to really change their deck that much. Like if you're a Sultai / 4-color player, again, a lot of options. You know that deck. You've kind of seen it all. You are, again, a quote-unquote control deck with a nice burst of proactivity. It's hard for you to be bad against anything. You just have game against absolutely everyone. So I see why people go in that direction. And I would say a lot of the same things about the Rakdos / Jund setups. Now, that being said, there are some Jund decks in this tournament that I hate. Like, hate them and do not want to see them registered for this event. I think some people have actually done some pretty hard missteps with their read on the format. But for the most part, if you build in a more classic way, I think it's hard to mess it up too bad by going down that road.
Yeah, I think the lowest creature count I saw was 23 in a Collected Company deck.
How what kind of wizard blessed life are you living where you can possibly have 23 creatures in your Collected Company deck?
It's funny too, because this is not a deck where you can Collected Company, hit one creature and be like relatively satisfied.
No, not at all. I mean, sometimes you hit two and you're like, well, I didn't really put anything together here. Like it's not, I don't know. You're not picking your creatures for their inherent strength. They're designed to be
used in tandem with other things. So
exactly.
So if you Collected Company into a Mayhem Devil and you're already set up, then that's great. Obviously. Yep. The problem is that these decks are playing Collected Company to try and get a 2-for-1 because a lot of the other format is focused on interacting with them and killing their stuff.
Yep.
And then you make it so your Collected Companies are very likely to hit one creature. I don't get it.
Don't get it at all. And I really don't prefer the Jund builds in general. I would have kept it cleaner Rakdos. No surprise to anyone who listened to our podcast. Apparently nobody participating in this tournament listens to our podcast. So no brave takers on the Bomat Courier setup. Gerry, what do you think about people not listening to you anymore? Because I know you, and I know your preparation has not changed for Magic. I know you think about it just as much. I know you care just as much. I know you have broken formats in recent memory, and you continue to kind of evolve things. And I think we rewind the clock a year and a half ago, and you did a whole podcast on the deck you were playing in the Pro Tour, probably a bunch of people pick it up. Now nobody picked it up. What is your opinion on that?
I don't know. So you're talking like a year and a half ago. Also around that time, if there was someone who was playing in the Pro Tour who was like an established figure, like gold or above, that told me that they listened to my podcast, I would be very surprised. And that happened with a few different people. Like basically, if you're like gold and above, those people consume like very specific amounts of content. You know, like maybe they'll read like a Apollo article or whatever, but they're not usually devouring like everything on Star City. And a lot of the people who are playing on the Pro Tour like didn't really listen to podcasts at the time. So some of that has changed slightly. Like I know that like Andrea Mengucci was the funniest about this because he was like, hey, I knew that you did this podcast, but I'd never listened to a podcast. I finally listened to yours. And it's like actually really good. I really enjoyed it. And then the next time I saw him, he was like, dude, I listen to podcasts all the time now. That's all I do is just listen. You just like, you know, tried to discover new podcasts and found a lot of things that he liked. So there are things like that happen where people actually get exposed to podcasts and are just like, oh, you know, like there are ways for me to work this into my schedule and consume some content, or at least, you know, have two people talk about Magic, which is like a thing that a lot of Magic players like to participate in anyway, you know? And the more and more that happened, the more it surprised me. But whether or not those people listen to me, you know, that's still up to them, right? And I don't know, there's like a certain amount of hubris involved, right? You're just like, all right, I'll listen to what you say, but I'm not necessarily going to like, you know, take it as gospel or anything. Like all these people still have their own experiences to go back on. And I don't know. I think people could probably benefit to listen to me more, but like they shouldn't listen to me all the time.
Yeah. I mean, you certainly get things wrong, just like everyone gets things wrong. And it would be crazy not to acknowledge that. I just feel like, I don't know, like I was there on the SCG tour during 2011, 2012. I wasn't like a regular participant, but anytime it was within 3 or 4 hours, I was likely to show up. And I know it was just like everyone coming to you and asking for deck lists all the time. And that's generally what would happen. And everyone would sit down and there'd be 12 people in the tournament playing your list and 4 would top 8. And that's how it went. And I don't think all that much has changed about like your quality as a deck builder or your desire to break formats. I think that's all still there. It's just you're not participating in the organized play. And it's just strange how like it feels like that has become a disqualifying mark against you, despite the fact that nothing else has changed.
I don't think so necessarily. Like interest in Magic has certainly waned for a lot of reasons, but I don't even think like a lot of people would, you know, do exactly as we said or whatever. I don't feel like that number has necessarily gone down.
Okay. I don't know. My read on it is different, but maybe I am just coming at it from a different angle and a different, honestly, like a different experience set. Like your experience set is kind of being part of the entrenched player base, where I always approached it as an outsider, and like information from people like you was extremely, extremely, extremely valuable to me because 1, I didn't have time to participate in the way I wanted to. 2, I respected your opinion. So I was almost reliant on you in a lot of situations. I don't know. I don't know that I get the same feel that people look to content creators in the same way. And maybe that's a good thing. Like maybe that's just net positive that there's more people who are willing to take their own shots and like.
But then why are we doing this? Why are we here?
I don't know. I have a good time. I like I said,
I mean, I enjoy myself, obviously.
Yeah. If nobody listened to us, I'd probably still show up to talk Magic with you every week. It's like just part of my routine now, but yeah, I don't know. I have asked myself that question before. Don't get me wrong. Like in moments where I feel like I'm screaming into the void, I'm like, what am I doing this for? And it's sometimes hard to find an answer, but I think enough people enjoy just hanging out with us for a conversation that even if they never played a deck we produced, we're still a net positive in their lives. So I'm fine with that.
All right. So 2 things. I think the disconnect is that you think the number went down of people who listen to me, and I think the number was always low.
Okay.
So I think
maybe I'm just talking about my own experience. Maybe I don't listen to you anymore. Maybe that's what I'm actually saying.
Dick. What a dick. Dude, you played my Bomat Couriers.
I did. I enjoyed the Bomat Couriers.
The other thing is, and this has been true for a long time, like if I were to win an open, people would copy that deck list.
Yes.
If I were to post a deck list doing all the same work and not go to the open, people would not copy it.
Yep.
And if I do a podcast where I'm like, yo, this deck is dope, versus post a screenshot with me being like top 300 Mythic, the amount of like difference between how far that information gets and how likely people are to copy that deck is dramatically different. Like you need to post the Mythic number next to the deck list. Otherwise people don't care. You need to post that you 5-0'd a daily, or like way back in the day that you 4-0'd a daily, or people don't care. That's always been true.
Sure. And honestly, I get that because there's so much information about Magic. You need to build in some filtration mechanisms or you'll just get bogged down. So I don't begrudge anyone for taking that approach. There's some degree of filtration you have to actively use or you will never get anywhere.
Like, maybe don't take my deck list exactly card for card, right? But the things that I'm saying about how to build decks or approach things, like those are pretty true. Maybe people should listen to those more.
Yeah, I saw some of that going through these lists where it just felt like people were kind of on the wrong axis, which is why the question came up, particularly when it came to things like the sacrifice decks. I thought we did a nice job laying out how we like to approach playing them. And there's just a lot of decks that are trying to be bigger, like a lot of Corval, Trail of Crumbs type stuff. And I don't know how you do that when there is this Uro Hydroid Krasis shaped monster looming over the format, to say nothing of Yasharn, which is like the KO. And we can get to that if you want to talk about that. I don't really understand the decision to exclude Yasharn from these Sultai / 4-colored decks. In my experience, I have not been impressed with Sultai over 4-color. Like I see them as basically two sides of the same coin, but a tremendous advantage with almost no downside coming from the addition of Yasharn.
I think you're kind of saying the same thing. So like people are trying to do bigger things in their sacrifice decks, which are still going to lose to Uro Krasis a lot of the time, right? Mm-hmm. At that point, why do you need Yasharn? Yasharn is kind of like training wheels, and it's like, yeah, it shuts them down real good, but is it actually worth the splash? I think the answer to that is yes, because it's good against a lot of different stuff. You know, trying to get the mana to cast it into your deck is really not all that difficult when you're playing 28 lands already. And, you know, then there are some other people who are like siding Tocatli Honor Guards and things like that against goblins, which I think is also pretty reasonable, you know? So I don't think the opportunity cost is super high to play the pig. It just isn't. But if your goal is to have like a very good, very consistent deck that is probably going to beat up on the sacrifice decks anyway, then cool. It could also be a matter of kind of like what you were talking about before, people not really paying attention to SCG events, people certainly not paying attention to us, and just being like, oh, like sacrifice isn't that good, I don't need to play the pig.
I think as a sacrifice or, say, goblins player, if I know I have to beat Sultai, I can engineer my deck in a way to do so. And I will. But the problem gets more complicated with Yasharn, and you get to steal a lot of game ones, which I think is super important. Again, like you said, it's always going to be a cost-benefit analysis, and I just think the cost is so low that I am pretty squarely on Team Yasharn. I don't know if you saw on Twitter, but I also posted all the full art Yasharns I bought this week, so maybe I'm just trying to actually hype my investment by putting the card over. But no, I actually do agree. It's extremely strong, and interesting how I don't think we've heard the last from that card in any format. Like, I think its time in Standard will probably come, and I think it has a very real role to play throughout its history in both Modern and Legacy, and that's why I'm so high on it. But it also fits into this format very squarely. Yeah,
I mean, Historic is just the right speed for it, right? Mm-hmm. Modern, yeah, I could buy it if there is something that it incidentally hoses, and that happens a lot with Historic. Like, yes, it is good against sacrifice, but it's also solid against goblins too. You know, they do a decent amount of sacrificing to try and get Muxus into play earlier, and then there's the random stuff like Neoform, right?
Yep.
I'm less likely to buy it in Legacy, but I mean, it doesn't take much, right? It's like all it has to be is like a Green Sun Zenith target in a Veteran Explorer deck or something,
Exactly.
and that's it.
Exactly. It just needs to cover some angle for some deck, and the tools in Legacy are so specific that if you can see a novel use for a card, it will generally find a home. Like just having 4 toughness body can matter a lot of the times in Legacy. So
Yeah.
the context is all there on the card for sure.
So I think there are 0 Bowmat Couriers in all of these sacrifice decks.
Agreed.
And it's like, okay, that's fine. You know, y'all are adults mostly. You're allowed to make your own decisions. But Gutter Bones? Really?
Not a Gutter Bones fan.
Really?
Unlike Tiny Bones, which we are a large fan of here on the podcast.
Big fans. Big fans of Tiny Bones. Gutter Bones.
Less valuable bones.
Dude, that's a card that when I was playing this deck, I would side it out against literally everyone because it was basically just a placeholder. It was like, I kind of need stuff to do on the cheap, kind of need stuff to do on turn 1, but this thing is not good, and you just take it out against everyone. Bowmat's actively good, y'all. What are you doing? And then if you want to make the argument that like, oh, it's maybe like kind of bad in the mirror because of Mayhem Devil, everyone's playing Skyclave Shade instead of Scrap Heap Scrounger.
Yeah, that is the one that is really wild to me. We kind of went off last week about how important everything that Scrap Heap Scrounger does is to its role in this deck, and how much of an unlock it was, and how Skyclave Shade sort of under-delivered in a lot of spots. And some people prefer it. Like there's 3-to-1 breakdowns in some decks of 3 Skyclave Shade and
there's 4-0. There's 4-0 too.
I don't know. I just don't know.
3-1.
Like we said, reach your own conclusions. That's fine, but that's a wild one to me.
3-1 I respect, because that's at least saying like, okay, these are 2 cards. They do different things. They have pros and cons, but like maybe having a mix is better than just playing 4 Skyclave Shades. And it's like, well, you're right. It should be 4 Scrap Heaps and 0 Shades probably. But like at least you're recognizing that like the 1 Scrap Heap has more value than the 4th Shade. So it's like, okay, you're almost there.
Yeah, there's something odd going on with the sacrifice lists in this tournament. I don't know how they're ultimately going to fare. It felt like they stood still since we saw the deck sort of break back onto the scene. And I just think they didn't do enough to cement edges anywhere that I believe in them right now. I think the deck needed to evolve a little bit, and I think it kind of just stood pat going into this week.
Yeah, I mean, it still has the Yasharn problem, right? And there are some players. Michael Bonda was the one that sticks out because his was one of the first lists that I saw because he posted on Twitter, and he had Chandra in the main deck. And it's like that is very cognizant the fact that Sultai is going to be big. You're going to face Yasharns in game 1s. And we talked about this last week where I didn't think that it was necessarily time to start having main deck answers to Yasharn, but you should definitely load up on answers in the sideboard. And a lot of players just did neither. Like they still don't have game 1 answers, and they also have like very few answers in the sideboard. And that I just don't understand. Like, I mean, I guess people are cutting it, so maybe you can get away with that to some degree, but I wouldn't, you know?
Yeah, I would not either. And like you mentioned, there are some people who have made appropriate concessions, especially when you could just do it with Chandra. It's so easy to make that concession. And I think that card's so good in so many matchups. It's strange to see people just kind of stand pat after they had put a target on themselves with a good Rakdos sacrifice finish. So I wanted more from this archetype coming into this tournament. That's one of the big points of disappointment I had with the list here, was that this deck had a real chance to evolve, and it just kind of stood still.
That's fine. We'll leave the innovations to the players grinding it out on ladder that are, you know, doing a lot of good work, are very, very good at what they do, and for some reason have like no roadmap to get to play in these tournaments.
Right. Yeah, unfairly so.
Goblins?
Goblins is goblins. Again, I think there's some concessions being made in some instances. You see some Chandra's main deck, certainly some more card advantage creeping its way into the main deck. So good adaptations from Goblins, and I think Goblins is just a deck that will stay solid throughout. It's going to be around 51% win rate every single time, and if you can lock that in, you'll take it in a bunch of instances.
What about the cool stuff? You want to talk about some cool decks?
Yeah, what's really impressed you amongst these?
Well, okay, so first of all, let me say that Ken Yukihiro and, to a lesser extent, Shota, I'm not super surprised by this, like Shota doing it, but they're both playing Sultai. Mm-hmm. So that's bad. Because Ken's like the person who's supposed to be playing the weird stuff, right?
The deck's a little offbeat. Like, there's a few odd decisions in it.
Yeah, of course, but like...
But it didn't go full Ken, for sure.
Yeah, come on, Ken. What are you doing? BBD and Riser, Shintaro Ishimura, were the only two people to play Kethis, and we're recording this at the time when the historic rounds are done. So I was like, oh, cool. Like they have sweet deck lists. They independently decided that maybe this is going to be the deck for them. BBD went 0-3, Riser went 1-2.
Womp womp. I'm a big Kethis fan, and my experience with this deck, every time I go to it in historic, is something is lacking. It's just not quite there.
My experience is Tashar doesn't work, and I rage quit and lament the fact that I spent like 15 wildcards building this deck.
There's that too. Yeah, I wish this deck had more to offer, and these lists look really clean, really good, really interesting. The Unburial Rights in BBD's deck I think is quite cool actually, but still I just haven't seen what I need to buy into Kethis yet.
Yeah, I think BBD had an Unburial Rights the last time he played this deck too.
That sounds correct to me, yeah.
Another cool deck. Wasn't sure how good this was going to be. Kowalski playing mono white 9 lives, but I don't know. Maybe Solemnity is good enough against Hydroid Krasis where it's like a reasonable card. And I think Kowalski started 2-1. But like this is a format where Wrath of God is pretty good. He's got Grafdigger's Cage main deck, and then this combo that a lot of people can't break up. So this is the type of thing that you were talking about earlier, where it's like, you're just trying to spike.
So this makes me think of Modern, which is weird because I understand this deck doesn't exist in Modern, but let me explain why.
It kind of does.
For a long time. Yeah, you could. Maybe you do it with like Enduring Ideal or something like that.
Right.
But anyway, for a long time, the Modern metagame, and this is I'd say basically prior to like War of the Spark, really, where more mid-range / control decks really started to pick up a ton of tools. Or you can draw the line at like Modern Horizons. That's a reasonable point as well. But for a long time, the correct thing to do in Modern was to find a hyper-linear approach that just nobody accounted for. And either through like the types of permanents they could deal with, or just strategically, they didn't have meaningful ways to interact with you. That's like how I got to playing Ad Nauseam at a Modern PT. And I think you can go up and down the list of like Storm having really good PTs and all these different linear approaches to Magic that just go in a little bit different direction when the format is too focused on graveyards or too focused on stack-based interaction or too focused on creature removal. That's the time you just find a new way to go in a very, very linear direction.
The easy version of this rule was like, if people are playing like 5 graveyard hate cards, they're probably not playing artifact hate cards, so you play Affinity. And then if people are playing a bunch of Stony Silences and Shatters and stuff, yeah, then you play Dredge. And it's like, Modern just did that dance over and over again. You're absolutely right.
Yep, and that was always my approach to Modern. And I think cards like Uro have done a lot to prevent this from being successful in most formats. And maybe you're having that effect a little bit on Historic, where you can't just rely on going down one axis. But if people can't answer 9 lives, like, this deck does a lot of good things, and Solemnity is a meaningful card in this format as well. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not just playing Solemnity, but when you can do something interesting with it, that's when these decks become appealing. And again, it's like the Ad Nauseam thing. Like, Phyrexian Unlife being a good card in the format at the moment I chose to play it was very, very important in my decision. So if you're picking up some points with Solemnity as well, I think you would talk me into playing this deck. Like, I think this might actually be a pretty good choice for this tournament.
I would play it in a tournament. I would not play it on ladder. Think of how long the games would go.
Way too long. Yeah, nobody has time for that these days. But if the stakes are high enough, you can get me to suffer through a lot. So
fair. All right. Kai Buddha playing a Sultai Paradox Engine deck. He started 3-0. This deck might be tight. This is Llanowar Elves, Emery, Kinnan, Bonder, Prodigy, a Michael Majors favorite.
Yep.
Some Uros, some Tamios, a couple Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, Balaged Recovery, Mindstone, Paradox Engine, Mox Amber, Chromatic Sphere, a Prophetic Prism, a couple Fatal Pushes, 19 land, sideboard interaction, typical Sultai stuff. This deck is sweet. This is exactly the type of nonsense that I try to do in Historic and fail every time. But I was never really trying Paradox Engine alongside Emery, and with Kinnan, you could just make a bunch of mana.
Yeah, this deck, as soon as I saw it, I'm actually surprised that Majors has never sent us something like this, because I feel like he's sent a lot of Kinnan decks our way. Really loves the card, and for a good reason. Like, it's powerful, particularly in this format where you have Chromatic Sphere available to you. So I don't know what to make of this deck. I'm not going to give any kind of opinion on how good it is. But again, if you're looking for ways to sidestep what the format's about, it's often going to be through like a combo-centric approach like this. And I don't know if there's actually a hard combo here. Is there like an actual just win the game on the spot setup?
I mean, like Emery, Mana Rock, Kinnan, Paradox Engine, Chromatic Sphere.
So it's not so much a combo. It's just when you put enough pieces together, you'll be able to do anything you want.
Yeah, you just draw your deck, right?
Right.
Draw your deck, make infinite mana, and then kill them with
that
Jace.
all sounds just delightful. And I am sure that I will be virtually sleeving this up on the ladder for a few games later this afternoon. But I do think like this is what the Historic format is still capable of, and kind of what I thought we might see coming into this PT, because it is a larger field for a Historic tournament. There's enough on the line where it felt like this was the moment we could really see some strong innovation in this event. And the innovation was honestly very limited. But as we mentioned with Gregor's deck, we mentioned with this deck, there's some things that have the potential to bear some fruit for sure in this field.
I'm honestly going to be disappointed if Majors is not working on this deck right this second.
Just already grinding.
Next deck, I actually have to find. Okay, well, let's just talk about this one. Brent Voss playing Esper Gift. Not a lot of God Pharaoh's Gift in this tournament, and Brent is doing some different stuff. Basically, using Citrus Supplier and Minister of Inquiries to do the like fill your graveyard thing, but then instead of trying to cast Refurbish from hand, he is Unburial Rightsing Scholar of the Lost Trove to get back a God Pharaoh's Gift, and then you also have Gate to the Afterlife to get that. So an interesting take. Brent started 1 and 2, but I think that there's something here in fairer versions of this format, and it just feels like the format's like a little too fast. And I don't like the fact that this version is like even more susceptible to things like Grafdigger's Cage.
Right. Yeah, I think this is a cool idea. I am just surprised that there's no Azorius Gift in this format. I actually think like the list that Piper Powell played to a top 8 in one of the SCG events, I wrote about it in one of my articles. I was not a believer in God Pharaoh's Gift in any setup in Historic. The card has just not impressed me. The mono black list did nothing for me. I really didn't have high hopes for Refurbish coming into the format, but I think Piper's list was really well built. And you saw, again, like a diverse array of game plans that the deck was capable of playing. And even like there was some backdoor beatdown stuff going on that seemed really appealing to me. So I was shocked actually to not see any Azorius Gift in this field. I think that deck's pretty good.
I think it's pretty good. I think Piper is really good.
Yes, I would agree with that as well.
So I don't know how that translates as far as like how viable that deck is, but I mean, Piper also makes like a lot of very good deck decision choices. So if you're interested in finding things in Historic that are not like the top 3 decks, that's definitely something you should check out. Another interesting deck is from Moto Grinder, Aspiring Spike, playing Bant Control. And this is again one of the weirdest things that I've seen in Historic, where this is just a bunch of Planeswalkers, Uro, Growth Spiral, couple Wrath of Gods, and then using Tail's End just as like a value counterspell in the format with Pact of Negation and also some Lotus Fields.
Wild approach. I, again, haven't played this deck, can't comment on how good it may actually be, but conceptually, I buy Tail's End as like a real card in the format that can make a big difference in a bunch of matchups. So that's a really good starting point when it's half engine, half just strong answer. I really like having access to that card. And then like Earl Growth Spiral can let you do a lot of things. And we're only doing one thing with it right now. We've decided like we do the Sultai stuff or the 4-color stuff, and we're going to use it to control the game. But it just covers so many game plans, and there is probably more space that has been underexplored thus far in the format that is about Uro and Growth Spiral. And I understand like not wanting to invest the time in sussing that out because there is already a very good Uro Growth Spiral deck. So like how much can you really gain by shifting a small amount of your interaction or a small amount of your game plan? But I think Aspiring Spike is showing us how much you can gain. You can gain a 3-0 at the PT with a different approach to these decks.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for like, why would you move away from Thoughtseize when Thoughtseize is one of the most powerful cards in the format? But also like those decks are, I mean, basically 4-color decks at this point, and blue-white control is a viable deck. So if you're like, well, how do I get Yasharn into blue-white control? I feel like that would solve some of the issues. I could kind of see how you would end up in something like this, but then I don't know, like getting Tail's End in there as a value card, but also a thing that can like counter your Pact or your Lotus Field or keep your Uro around. You know, it's like got so much utility in the deck. And this is the type of thing where if you do the work and you actually, you know, figure out what's in the format, what you're trying to do, and you don't dismiss anything, this is somewhere where you could end up. And I think that that's really sweet. And that's what I want to see more of out of Historic going forward.
I agree with you. I think there is space for it. And maybe it takes not a split tournament. Maybe it needs to be like a hard focus on Historic for a PT. I don't know what the rest of the PTs look like, if there'll ever be a moment for just focus on Historic, or, you know, maybe the format just needs a little bit more time, a little bit more history under its belt, and then it'll start to develop those opportunities for more expressive deck building. But there are moments of it here for sure.
Last one, I'm going to tell a little story. Brian was looking through deck lists. I was checking standings for the folks whose deck lists I had already selected that I want to talk about. And Brian was like, yo, how's my boy Carl doing? So I typed in Carl, and I spelled it with a C, and the only Carl that came up was Carlos Romao.
Not who I was looking for. Although, nothing against Carlos Romao. I hope he's having a fine tournament as well.
I actually didn't look at how he was doing.
Okay.
I was just like, this is the wrong Carl. So finally typed in Carl with a K, Carl Sarap. And I was like, 6 points. Carl's 2-1. He's the only person in the tournament playing Rakdos Arcanist. And we saw this already with Salvato, right? One of the few people playing Arcanist and just doing well. People just don't respect. They don't respect it.
It just never has a bad performance. It's like completely solid. It has game against everyone. It's a ton of fun to play. Whatever. I've hyped this deck enough. I don't need to keep trying to sell people on it. I'm sure you've played it by now. You're either a believer or you're not. I continue to be a believer. Deck's solid.
Dude, I think there are just a lot of people who haven't played it.
I don't know why. I mean, people love this style of deck.
The economy would be my guess.
Okay. That's fair.
I've played a decent amount of things in Historic, but definitely not as many as I would like. Like, I'm probably just never going to play a game with goblins. That's just not going to happen.
You owe it to yourself to live the Muxus life once or twice. I'm trying to think what I haven't played with in Historic. I feel like I've played a game with like everything. I'm having a hard time finding a blank spot. I mean, I haven't played like 9 Lives or any of these more obscure things, but like,
right.
The big players I've certainly touched at some point in the format.
Dude, I'm just not going to spend 20 wild cards to play like 5 games with goblins. It's just not going to happen.
They have their hooks in me. I'm fully a Magic Arena whale, so they can just have all my money. I've given up on trying to be reasonable with my Arena investment.
I kind of did the opposite where because before I would be like, all right, I put in some money, I like grind a bunch, and then I end up with a bunch of currency, and I wanted the foils. I wanted the card styles, right? And I just, every time a card style pops up in the store, I'm just like, no, I'm just not doing it. I don't care that it's 90% off. I'm just not going to buy it.
I got off the card styles. I stopped buying them. Like I basically styled out the first deck I played a lot of on Arena, which was Simic, Nexus of Fate.
Yep.
And after that, I actually never really bought foils or whatever the equivalent is ever again. I have bought a couple basic lands that I like, but that's it.
Yeah. I like them a decent amount. I definitely don't like that they come from gems and like nothing else.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that was a very healthy decision for me, was to just be like, nah, I'm just not going to buy any more styles.
At least the tagline on the styles isn't like miss it and they're gone forever like they are with the secret layers. That's my point of anger today, by the way. I angrily tweeted about the secondary tagline of the secret layers just saying the quiet part out loud and threatening you with FOMO marketing on their allegedly scarce product that they could just make at any point in time again. So
you like how they released the numbers of like, oh yeah, well this Walking Dead secret lair that you didn't like sold really well. And it's like, yeah, we didn't like it because it's super predatory. And that just proves it.
It's designed. Its only purpose is to sell extremely well. Like that is what it's built to do. If you fail at that, then it shouldn't exist for any reason, because it's certainly not aesthetically pleasing or like beneficial to the long-term legacy of the game. It's strictly to generate a quick buck. So if you didn't do that, I don't know what to tell you.
I think very few people were of the opinion that it would not sell well.
Correct.
You know?
Correct. I was very sure it was going to sell.
Well, like, did you just kind of like hear fourth hand that people were mad on Twitter, and that's just what you assumed the reason was? Because maybe you should delve in a little deeper.
Yeah, my anger with Secret Lair continues to grow as time goes on, but I know like they do bring some instances of joy to people. Like people like seeing the arts. I am off it as an idea, though. I think it'll long term be a very harmful thing to Magic.
Did you see the thread that I retweeted of Seb's?
I don't believe so, no.
So Seb McKinnon has his own secret lair. Not that I want to like advertise this stuff. I'm not going to buy them. I understand that, you know, if people want to buy them, that's cool. And
I'll buy prints from Seb of like his art.
Yeah.
If I really like it.
Yeah, you should do that.
That makes sense to me.
But it was basically just like how he had carte blanche to do whichever cards that he wanted. And rather than, you know, just like picking sweet cards, he was like, well, I want to tell a story. And then, you know, he told a story through flavor text and the art, and just like talks about the entire process of going through it and how he, you know, touched up the art to make it cooler and was very cognizant of like how it would look in the frame. So like, these are all the things that he had to change. And it's just like this really incredible thread where I think a lot of people are just like, you know, they look at the picture and it's like, okay, you know, that's cool or it's not or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it's like, damn, like this dude is good. He gets it. He cares.
That's really cool. I will definitely check out that thread. And like I said, like that's the element where I know these things are going to bring some joy to some people. So I try not to like be a Grinch about it, but you know, we all have our Grinchy instincts, and using a predatory tagline is definitely going to set off my alarm bells.
Dude, it's why we don't do YouTube anymore, you know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, we had plenty of conversations. We'll peel back the curtain a little bit. We had plenty of conversations about our involvement with YouTube, and it just felt like we had to be participating in a way that made us both uncomfortable. Like we had to do things that were bordering on beyond clickbait, honestly. Just like
it's clickbaity, but also YouTube trends negative.
Yeah.
They are far more likely to promote your video if you have like a negative connotation or word in your subject line. Yep. And that's not what we do.
Yeah, it didn't feel good. And the stuff that we were getting really large responses to were usually like, not necessarily complain pieces, but like shocked pieces. A lot of our most watched stuff was like emergency ban stuff. Yeah. And there was the time when the emergency bans really started popping off that we were messing with YouTube. And that stuff would get incredible engagement and introduce all new people to our brands and felt kind of good, but then you realize that was the only thing that was actually getting engagement on the platform, was us just being upset about stuff. And I don't want to be upset all the time. I want to look at the good side of things. And there is some good with the secret lair, but it's wrapped up in a pile of bad, I think. So
yeah, there are people who like them, and that's great. They should make products that people like that also don't have the bad stuff attached. But
I would like that more.
But money.
Classic arena decklist answer, but money.
Yeah, I like YouTube. I like the idea of it, right? But yeah, in practice, it did not work out for us, and I don't know if there's a way to beat that, like based on how the system is set up. Like they would have to make some pretty drastic changes, I think.
Yeah, it's odd. It's odd being entrepreneurs who don't like being entrepreneurial, because we are so painfully aware of how every single like entrepreneurial exchange is exploitative in some sense. Like there's always like, you are supposed to be generating value with your performance or your time. And we're so keenly aware of that it often fights against our instincts of like, we should do this content or we should do this content. And slows down a lot of our creative process for sure.
Yeah. The bad part is like, man, I wish I had more money to do like X, Y, and Z or whatever, right?
Right.
And then it's just like, well, here's a way that I could be more exploitative and make more money, but it's like, I don't want to do that. So It's like, I'm not really happy either way.
Right. Yeah. The struggle is constant. And, it's not unique to what we do either. Like I certainly felt it in the professional world as well. So I think everyone deals with it on a very regular basis.
Yeah, but then they're just like the people who, I mean, I guess this is like a good tie-in, right? It's like the Wizards of the Coast thing, right? It's like, well, yeah, maybe they see secret lairs as exploitative or whatever, but then they're just like, but dollar signs, right?
Yeah.
And
I don't even know that they're exploitative. They're just like designed to make money. And like, so is everything else they do. It's just, this is a very, very forward application of the idea. Like it is all about money. Whereas it has always felt to me like Magic has a heart and essence and a core. And that's one of the reasons I love it so much. And I've loved it for such a long time.
It's also one of the reasons it has longevity, right?
Exactly.
And why it's been around.
And it feels in some ways that the secret lair stuff betrays a lot of those principles to me. That's just my read on it. Maybe it's thinking too hard about a children's card game. We like to use that dismissive term. But Magic is so much more than that to me and so many people I know, that I'm never going to dismiss these concerns out of hand. Like I do think there is a beauty and a purity and a grace to the game that as it has existed for 20 some years. And I do see secret lairs as like a challenge to
that. to kind of circle back, one of the things that made me really mad is actually probably because they didn't include the tagline of like, get it now or they'll be gone forever. Where like, I bought some of the styles of the Shocklands that I was using and then was never able to complete the set.
You were able to get the other ones. Yeah.
I just thought I'd be able to buy them like the rest, but it was like also just one of those things where it's like, get them in the store now or else they'll be gone forever. So I would play like, I don't know, I think I was playing like Teamer at the time, right? So I had those 3 sets of Shocklands, and then you try and play like Grixis or whatever and, don't have the other one or something. It's like, what? This sucks.
What a weird system. But got to make that FOMO.
Well, if they did that, I would have bought them. That's the thing. They didn't FOMO, so I didn't buy them, and then it made me mad. But like, it's better for me, I suppose. Yeah.
Well, the other way it could have went is that you just like bought them all right off the bat from that point forward, because you didn't ever want to experience that again.
Yeah. Well,
but that's what this is. Like, you can do it once, and like maybe you'll get some people, but you'll also make some people mad. And
yeah. My experience now is just like, don't buy the styles.
Yes, and I am concerned that if you continue to do this in the Magic space, that will be a routinely occurring thing where people just go, okay, I'm over this.
I don't know. So now I see people that have all the styles and I'm like, respect, a little bit of jealousy, but I'm just like, I'm just not going to do that. I just can't. I'll play with my stupid steam vents and like no other Ravnica Shockland in my deck, or just turn them off completely, which is also what I've been doing.
Yeah, wise idea. I'm glad you have overcome your problem. I am struggling with my own Magic purchasing problems, but the one thing I have stood firm on, no secret layers in my house thus far, and I pretty committed to that idea that they won't ever enter. So
yeah, I ain't got no secret layers. I don't know what it would take for me to buy one. It's just not going to happen, I don't think.
With you.
And you're also making like paper purchases a lot of the time, right? Like some Skyclave apparitions, some Yasharn, stuff like that. Like that's a good investment. Arena card styles, not a good investment.
Yeah,